Cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back. Today is the week one of the pre-intermediate level. It is the week four if you count it as continuous of the previous course. If you are here, I suppose you have enough knowledge about C# programming, the basics at least, or you have been to my basic level. We are currently doing the basic level also on Saturday at the same time. So if you have missed it, you can attend on Saturday at the same time for the basic level. But yeah, today we will talk about object-oriented programming. We will have a look at some of the classes and the concepts. So previously in the basic course, we have learned how to create variables. We have learned how to create lists. We have learned how to create loops, and we have seen also how to make conditions and a switch statement. I assume it is now pretty easy for you to do all of those because this course would be based on those concepts. I will mute everyone and I will enable the raise hand button. So if you have a question, then you can just raise your hand. So the content of this week, we will talk about classes and objects. We will see what they are and how to create them. We will see what is the access modifiers and what is the difference between them. At least we will see some of them, but not all. We will talk about the members of a class, which would be the fields and the methods. So I hope by the end of this session, you can define a class with its members, and you can create an object of a class type. You would have the ability to declare and use some fields to store some data in that class or in that object of that class. And of course, using methods to make behavior in that object. This lecture would be divided into two sections. The first section would be the theory part, where I can just show you the slides and talk about what the syntax is, what the meaning of the code is. And the second part would be the demonstration, where I will share my screen and we will try to create an application together. Because you last time voted for not having a quiz, I guess I will skip the quiz and go straight into the week. So the problem is, or the program that we are going to create is a bank account management application. So think about this problem. How would you implement an application to keep track of a client's application, a client's bank account, keeping track of the balance, of the information about the client, and also have some actions to perform, like deposit money, see the balance, etc. So what is the basic solution for this problem is simply, as you have learned in the basic course, is to create variables, a variable for a name, a variable for the account number, variable for the balance. And of course, you can make the actions just by assigning, let's say, the deposit money. You can just get the money that they want to assign and then just sum it with the current balance. For seeing the balance, you can just show it as a message box. It's pretty easy. But what if the application needs to support two bank accounts? Well, you can simply create another set of variables for the second account, name 2, account 2, balance 2, and you can create those methods or those actions by copy and paste, right? So we copy and paste the code, and we want to add more variable and use if statement to determine which bank account the money is going to be a deposit in or withdrawn from. But this approach can make your code very messy. So those questions are related to the extensibility and the maintainability of your code. The extensibility is taking the future growth into consideration. For example, adding an extra information or a possible action. So right here, if you want to include the address of the client, then you have to create two more variables, and then you'd have also some codes here to check and assign. By the maintainability, we make sure that the modification of or the correction that could happen easily. For example, modifying the value of a variable or an action, it could be happen easily. But now for this, it's just two. But what if your application needs to have track of 10 bank accounts? Now you can see what the problem is. You can see that this is going to be very messy code. And this is just only for 10 bank accounts. And you can just imagine how a real bank application would look like if you follow this method. So for this reason, as a programmer, you will want to group stuff together in order to have one piece of data rather than separate information stored in integers, strings, etc. For example, putting all the information of the bank account together. Additionally, you would not want to repeat yourself, of course, like I said, for the extensibility and the maintainability purposes. And for that, we introduce the classes. A class is like a blueprint of a specific object. So we have seen how to create an integer variable or a string variable, and those are types. A class is something that allows you to create your own type. So like I have here, a class is just like a blueprint of a specific object. In real world, for example, every object has some color, has some shape, and has its own functionalities. For example, let's take an example of a car, of a luxury car. A Ferrari, it's a luxury car, right? It's an object of luxury car type. The luxury car class that specifies certain characteristics like speed, color, shape, the interior, etc. And we can also see that many companies make a lot of cars which will have those characteristics, and it will be considered as a luxury car. And those cars also considered object of that luxury car type. So this is in general in real life, and it is the same concept in programming. A class is something to define certain properties, certain fields, events, methods, etc., which will define the kind of data and the functionalities you want your object to have. So by grouping related codes together, we create an entity, which is the object of that specific type. This is done by writing the specification of an entity, like the data and the actions, defining a class with the data and methods. With the methods are the actions. And of course, then you need to use that class by creating the object of that class. So what are the benefits of classes? And we have seen some. First thing is abstraction, or those are only two things, but there are a lot more. Abstraction is to represent the essential feature without representing the back end or the background details. And it is a way of hiding and storing the data and how it operates. And you just show just like a button or a way for the user to interact with the backend, but you hide how you actually do that. Abstraction lets you focus on what the object does instead of how it does it. And also it generalizes the view of your class or your object by providing relevant information. It also has the separation of responsibilities. So if you create a class, make sure it has only one single responsibility, which will also help you if you want to extend your application in the future or you want to fix something in the future. You can just see where that problem is and in which class, and you just go directly to it. The class has members. It can be fields or methods or both. So the fields are the data and the methods are the actions. So from those things on the screen, can you identify what are the fields and what are the methods? So the fields are the address of the client and whether the balance may be negative or not. The methods are the withdraw money from the bank, changing the name of a client, transferring money to another bank account, etc. So the actions are the methods. The way you create a class is simply by writing the keyword class in a file. We will see how to create the separate file for a class in the demo. And after that keyword class, you will give the identifier of your class, and of course two curly braces. Inside those two curly braces, you would have the members of your class, which is the instance variables or the fields and your methods. So this is the creation of your class, and then outside of your class, in separate part of your program, you will create an object of that class. So creating an object is like creating a normal variable. First, you will have the type of that variable, which is the name of the class, and then you will create the identifier or give it a name and a semicolon. Of course, you can do both of those lines together at the same time without the semicolon, of course. But also you can separate them in two lines. After that, after the declaration of your variable or of your object, comes the initialization of your object, which is giving that identifier the new keyword and then the class name and two parentheses with semicolon. Those two parentheses are something we will talk about in the future, but for now they are just empty. The new keyword, it make a new instance out of this class, and it has all of your instance variable and all of its methods initiated, and it has all, they all have the standard normal value at the beginning. So if it's an integer, it will be 0. If it's a string, it will be null, etc. And of course, each object has no relation with any other object whatsoever unless you define it as so. An example, so here we have created a class called bank account by saying public, which is something we will see in a couple of slides more. And then we have class, which is a keyword, and then bank account. And here we have some fields and some methods. Here we have created our first object of that class, which is just by giving the name of that class or the type, and then the name of that variable. And like I said, you can just do all of those at once in one line. Here we have assigned the new keyword and the bank account to parentheses at the same time. This is creating the variable and initiating it at the same time. Some small tips and extra information. Define a U class in its own file. You can actually create multiple classes in one file, but I advise you not to. Create each class in a separate file. It's just more organized for your project, and it is easier for you to come back and fix stuff. Also, the naming convention for C# among the developers are or is the Pascal case, which is the capitalize the first letter of each word. So here, like this, we have bank account, we have the first B and this first A, all capitalized, and the rest are just small letters. Just a tip. You don't have to follow it, of course, but it's just something everyone use. And the naming of the object is just the same as naming of your variables. One thing is to notice that if you create an object and you didn't initialize that object with the new keyword, and you try to access that object later on in your program, it will give you a null pointer exception or null reference exception. This is an error, means that you created a variable, you have the pointer pointing to a specific place in the memory, but that place in the memory is still empty. You didn't initialize that object. That's it for the general intro of classes. Is there any question? Angela?
Mohammed, first of all, I wanted to thank you so much for doing this class. It's very helpful. You're covering a lot of material that I've really been trying to understand and struggle with. So thank you so much. I just wanted to quickly ask, are you going to put this on YouTube so I can look at it again just a little slower for me?
Yes. Yes. I'm currently recording it, and it will be on YouTube, I think, by 11 o'clock, next 2 hours.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We have the next question from Ronald.
Yeah, hi, Mohammed. I joined you before time, so 2 minutes before 9. And I suddenly realized I was only seeing the first slide. So I had to leave and come back to be able to see the real slides. So I just wanted to let you know that I had a small problem.
Oh, does anyone else have the same problem? No?
No? Okay, no.
Yeah, maybe your headset just hang a little bit.
I saw you move.
Problem with Altsmith.
That's okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for telling me. Actually, I am watching using the other account also. I have 2 PCs side by side, so I am watching the slides on the screen and presenting the screen and watching you guys, your questions and stuff. It's a little bit overwhelming, I know. Okay, let's go on with the access modifiers. So you have seen the keyword public, and that is the access modifier. Access modifier is, how would I explain it? Is a keyword that will allow you to have different privileges to access your class and also the members of that class. So the private keyword, there are also a lot of access modifiers. I only covered here 2 of them. You can look the rest up online. But those are mostly the most used to access modifiers. The private is a keyword used to have the member of that class or the class itself only accessible from within the class itself. So you cannot create an object of that class outside and try to interact with the field if they are set to private. We will see that in a couple of minutes. And public means that everyone can access that class or that field, and it will be just for everyone. Why would you use access modifiers? You might want to make some information available only under certain constraints. For example, your balance should be only modified under a secure condition. You can actually make those things inside the class before assigning the new balance. And if you want maybe your data is only to be shown to the user but not modified after all. So you create a bank account, you want that ID of the bank account will be never edited afterward. You can create it as a private field. And you can edit only internally using your backend. Fields are the instance variable, are just variables in the class. So you have the object, and that object contains instance variables inside it. Those are the fields. Those also can have the keyword private or public or otherwise. You already are familiar with the variables. It's defining it is the same. So here, as an example, we have created the bank account class like before, but now we have the fields are just normal variables with a keyword private or public. Private means that you can access this variable only from within the class itself. Public means that you can access it from the outside. Here we have created the object of that class in a separate, different place of your application, not inside the class. And after the initialization, here we are trying to access the balance. The balance here is this field. And because it is public, we can access it. And the way you access it is just by adding the name of your variable or your object. I will stop using keyword variable as referring to an object because it might be a little bit confusing. I was using it before just because you were familiar with the keyword variable more than an object. So here you could use your object and you would use the dot keyword or dot symbol. We have seen this dot when we have edited the user interface. So a dot will just bring you all the possibilities that you can have or interact with that object. Now here we can only interact with the balance because it is the only one public. So what is this new keyword? Let's see it as a representation. So here is the memory, just this box. And here we have created the bank account object, but we didn't initialize it yet. So we have now created a reference or a pointer, which is pointing to a null in the memory. So here we have nothing, but we only have the name of that object. If you are trying to use it here, it will give you null exception, which is just an error, and it will break your application unless you deal with it. After you add the new keyword, it will initialize that object and all its members to the default values. So when creating an object, somewhere in the memory, the values of all of the instance variables or the fields are stored. They are going to be initialized to either zeros if they are integers, empty if they are string, or could be null, I'm not sure. And those are for the primitive types. And then, of course, after you initialize your object, you assign the value to that field, and then that value will go to the reference and then go to the field of that reference in the memory. So there are just two steps. and that's why you have the name and the balance separated by dot. Yeah, you already now know how to create a field, just the same way as you create a variable, just by adding the access modifier before it, which is private or public. But a thing is that you can use the keyword this and dot. This means if you are trying to access the method, or not the method, sorry, the field from within the class itself, you should try to add the this keyword. It is not necessary all the time, but it is a good practice to use it if you are referring to the field. I will try to demonstrate the difference between with or without the this keyword in the demo section. Yeah, this is already explained. So here we have a mistake in the code. If you can identify it yourself, it would be awesome. If you couldn't, it's understandable. The issue is that this cannot be done because the account holder is private. And here outside, we are trying to access the account holder and assigning the Joe value to it. And you can't do that because it's private. You can only access it within itself, the class itself. Yeah. Okay. Extra information field should follow the naming convention. I already said that. Pragmatics keep fields private unless you have a very good reason to not to do that. If you create those fields as private, you can create a method which will assign or read from those. We'll see the methods in the next slides. Is there a question about the fields? Okay, Saint.
Hello.
You have megaphone.
Yes.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I have a question regarding slide 26. It's about the balance. If it's a public field, yeah. Okay. So that is fine. If it's a public field, does it mean that you can edit the balance outside of the class?
That's exactly what it is. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And I presume that you do not want that if you're making an actual bank account.
That is exactly, yeah, exactly. That's exactly why here I said create the fields as private, and then you create the methods, and those methods should assign the new value to that field by, of course, adding some checking, some verification before adding the new balance or subtracting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Is there any other questions? I don't see anyone on the list, so I will go on. Next section is methods. A method is just a block of code. You are already have been adding blocks of codes before. Those are grouped in a class, and they will be copied to every object of that class. They are just to perform actions on the stored data of that object, basically. So you might want to manipulate the instance variable while applying certain constraints, like I just mentioned. If you want to add a balance or subtract a balance, you create the balance field as a private, and then you create a method which has some verification, some checking if the guy or wherever the person is actually the account holder, and then you verify if they have enough money to subtract from. And so you have a lot of other things to check before actually deducting the money, and this is only an example of money. The methods are also a way to reuse those blocks of codes multiple times instead of copy and paste like we have seen in the previous early slides. So a method has two types of method. There are two types of method. Let me put it like this. There is a void method, and there is a method which has a type. The void method, it's just a piece of code which will be executed, and it will not return to you any result or any. It will it will have a result on the code, but it will not return to you any answer. The typed method is the same as the void method, but it will return to you an answer. So an example of a void method would be, let me think. I will come back to it. I don't have anything in my mind right now. As an example for a type method, would be returning the current balance. So the method check the current balance and then return to you the answer. Maybe a method with a void, it will just assign the new balance or add a new money to the account, and you don't need to return anything after that. That would be a void. By making a public keyword followed or preceded by a void, and then the name of the method, two parentheses, this is the way you declare a method of the type void. A method can have 0 or more parameters, and those parameters would be placed in between those two parentheses. Those parameters are your way to give extra piece of information from outside the class to the class itself. Let's see how do you use this method. So we have created here a method of type void. And of course, when you create your object of that class, you can just add the dot keyword like you are using a field, and then the name of that class, if that method, if it's public. And at the end, you would have the two parentheses. So those two parentheses means that it is the time to execute that method. It is the same thing as those two parentheses after the new keyword. It means that I want to execute the constructor of that class. I will talk about constructors next week on Sunday. But for now, the method is written like this, or the use of the method is written like this. The other way of making a void method with some parameters, I'm losing my words. So it's basically adding the keyword double or integer or string or whatever the type of that piece of information you want to pass in, and then the name of that variable. Those two things would be handled within the class itself and from the outside the class. So here we are passing the amount that we want to deposit for this piece of code or this method. And of course, we are summing that amount to the current balance. The way you use it from outside the class is just by adding the amount that you want to deposit in between those two parentheses. And this amount should be with the same type of the parameter. So if you have a string here, you should write a string here. If you have a double, you should write a double, etc. And of course, you can add multiple parameters. It doesn't have to be one. You can add as many as you wish. And you separate those parameters by a comma. So the general syntax is to add the public keyword of that for that method. It could be also private. A private means it's only from within the class. Public from outside. Void because it's a void. And the name of that method. And here you would have the list of all the parameters you have or you wish to pass to. and the calling of that method is just the same as previously, but in between those two parentheses you would have the list of arguments. Now let's move on to the typed method, which is another type of method which will return to you an answer. This method will return to you an answer of the type integer. So we created a public integer get account number. So this method will go look for the account number in the fields of that object, and it will return to you that keyword or that answer of the type integer. The way you use this method in the method itself, you should use the return keyword because it should return something. And after that is the answer you want to return. We are using the keyword this, which is referring to the field of the class itself. It would be easier when I show you that in the demo. But of course, when you are trying to access that method, because it's going to return to you an answer, you should assign that part of your code to another variable so you can store your answer. This is basically the same as previously. You can add set of parameters or arguments in between the two parentheses. You would have all the things that you want to do before the return keyword. One thing to mention is if the compiler is going in your code or through your code line by line and it hits a return keyword, it will exit your method. It will not do the rest. If you have something after the return, it will not do those. So just to make sure that you understand, a return is also an exit of that method. This is just the general syntax. I'm not sure if it's helpful now because we already explained it. Let's see. The compiler knows the difference between a field and a method by detecting whether the identifier of the member is followed by a pair of parentheses. Like I said, you can separate the parameters with a comma, and you can have as many as it is allowed for you. There is something here to mention that it is, I'm not sure if you would understand this for now, but if you try to create an object and pass that object to another object using a parameter, it will be passed by reference. And if you pass a normal variable to an object, it will be passed by value, which means that here we have integer a equal 10, which means that the 10, it will be copied to the method. If the method will add 1 to that parameter, it will exit right here, and then at the end, the a variable is never changed because this only affects itself. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is something you understand right now, but it is very important for the future. I will try to re-mention this if we proceed with the course to the advanced level. For the naming convention of a method, it's preferably to use verbs like get money, deposit money, subtract, do something, right? And for fields are just names or nouns. Using the method, it's preferably to use it as public unless you have a good reason not to. And of course, your fields should be private. Is there any question before we go to the demo? Let me also drink some water. Okay, I understand now this is a heavy long session, and I still have to demonstrate some stuff. Hopefully I will be able to do that in 20 minutes. Yes, Angela?
Mohammed, can you go to slide 36?
Slide 36.
I'm trying to understand what the code is doing here. So is the class called update interest?
No, this is a method within the class. So the class is
Okay.
something surrounding this method. It's not
Okay,
not
so
written
that's
on
a
the slide.
method.
Yes.
Okay, so update interest is a method. Okay. And then where it says bank account, that first line, is that one script and then the second line's a second separate script?
Well, I'm not sure what is your definition of a script,
Oh,
but this class is in a file. It could be described as in quote script, but in those two things are in the same place, same file, same script, because you
so let me-
initialize it right here.
okay, so let me say it like this. Are those two different lines of instruction, or is that one long line of instruction?
Oh, yeah, there are two separate lines. There are semicolon at the end. You could have both of them in one line, and they are both still separated by semicolon. They would be two statements.
Okay, and so these two separate lines of code, is that, you would put that typically in the middle of the brackets where it has, where you have body of method, where you've indicated some notes there? Is that where that would go?
No, this
No.
this piece of code, it would be in a different place of your application. So this method is part of a class. A class
Okay.
is just a blueprint. You define it somewhere and you just leave it. You don't interact with it anymore, or you don't add code to it if you finished with it. But then when you go to your form, let's say if you are doing in a form application, in a button or in somewhere in your application, you create your account and then interact with that object.
Oh, okay, so this is not in your IDE, it's somewhere else?
Exactly. You will see it in a few seconds in the demo. It will be more understandable, I hope.
Okay.
Thank you for your question. Is there anything else?
I actually did have a couple more questions now that I
Yeah,
understand
go
what you're
ahead.
doing.
Yeah,
Okay,
go ahead.
so then just looking at, I want to understand the two lines of code. So basically you said bank account as, I guess that word is like the name of the class, and then you used my account to establish a variable, is that right?
Exactly.
Okay, and then so you've got this variable and you're setting it equal to new account. Again, can you define what that word new is again?
Okay, let's go way back to here. So you can create only bank account with the name of that variable. Is just like creating a string and name that a string something, that variable, right? So we create this object, and this object will be pointing to a piece of your memory, but it is empty. It's still empty. It doesn't have anything in it.
Okay.
By saying the new keyword and then the name of that class, you say, okay, this variable, it is of the type bank account, and I want to create a new instance of that bank account and assign it to it. So you have the my bank account here, or my Bay Joe, is now pointing to an object in the memory with all the fields and the methods that you have created in the class somewhere else.
Okay, so
Did that help?
I get, yes, but how does it know? I understand you're saying now, I want you to point to this account number, this account holder, this balance, but how does it know just by saying bank account and some parentheses? How does it know that it needs to look at those three different objects?
Right, because when somewhere in your application like this, we have created the class bank account, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we
Mm-hmm.
have this piece of code, and
Okay.
it says that whatever object is going to be created from this type, bank account, it's going to
Mm-hmm.
have an account number, an account holder, and a balance and some extra code. All of those would be properties or characteristics of the
Of that.
object from the tab bank account.
Okay.
So
And so
when
this.
after that, mhm.
Mm-hmm. Go
So after
ahead.
that, when you create an object of that class, all of those things I have mentioned, it will be copied to your object.
Oh, I see. Okay. And so then the second line of information, can you explain that one? The my.
This one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this one is by saying my balance equal 100 or something. Is I'm saying that I want to access now the copy of all the fields that I have already copied in my object, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to assign 100 to the balance. So it will
Okay.
go through all of them, see where is the balance, and then assign 100 to it.
Okay. Thank you. That makes sense to me. Thank you.
It was my pleasure to explain. Thank you so much for your question. Next question is from Saint or Sint.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is St. Clair, so St is fine. Thank you. I had a question with respect to methods. If I understand correctly, you use fields as parameters, or in your parameters you use fields, but can you use methods as an argument in the parameters as well? Or, yeah.
Okay, there are a couple things in your question I have to address. First, you don't use fields in your parameters. You use variables somewhere else.
Okay.
The fields are from the class itself, but you can use those fields as a parameter, and you can use a method as a parameter, but this would be extra advanced level. I'm not sure I will cover that, but
Okay.
you can actually pass another method to a method and have a tree of methods.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'm not sure if I helped. I hope I will explain that better in the demo. Well, I have 10 minutes to create a demo. How would you create a bank management application in 10 minutes? That would be breaking the record. I should go and share my screen from here. Share, go to the link. Okay. If you've seen yourself, show me some hearts, please. Okay, cool. It works for everyone. Okay. In meanwhile, I will be facing Visual Studio, so I won't be looking at you. If you have a question, you can just, I don't know, use an emoji. I can hear only the sound of an emoji, so I can understand there is something wrong or have a question. So I create a new Windows Form application. You already know how to do that. I will say classes week 1, just a name, doesn't matter for me, it might matter for you. I will also move this guy recording so you can see it better if you watch it afterwards. Okay, so let's create the same concept. Let's create an application that will manage some banks or some bank account in a bank and have some methods. Let me go very quick. First, I will add some buttons. I will try to give them a name later on. Still need maybe another one. I'm going to have some text boxes. Okay. Another one. And another. Let me just put this one right here. Well, I'm not a designer, so don't quote my design. I will add a label saying name, another label here. I don't know what else. Account number, I guess. Or well, let's not have an account number. Let's say address. Doesn't really matter. Just some information. This is going to be the balance. And this is going to be also balance. And let's add another one right here. This button, I will give it a name as create account. This one will be withdraw. Hope I spelled it correctly. This one will be deposit. We'll change the names. PTN deposit. PTN withdraw. And PTN create. I like to add PTN as the beginning prefix, as it's referring to a button. You don't have to. Label current balance. This would be text box name, and this would be text box address. Is the address single D or double D? I always get confused between the Dutch version and the English version. Anyway, so I have this for now. I should create a list. Oh, this is going to take longer than I expected, and I only have 5 minutes. Well, if you stayed here, you didn't exit, you're still going to see. I will continue after we finish this time limit. But if you exit after the 10 o'clock, you wouldn't be able to enter again. This list box is going to show the accounts. Yeah, let's leave it as a list box. I don't care. Let me just run it very quickly. See if it works before we add codes. Okay, where is the list box? Visible, visible. It's enabled and it's visible. Let me add something. Right. Okay. Let me add a label so you know that this thing is going to be accounts. Anyway, the design is pretty not good. I will go to the coding part now. So this is the initial code that is generated, right? Now we want to create a class for the bank, and also we want to create a class for the user. But because we don't know how to interact with the constructor, which will be next week, so stay tuned, we will only now create an account class, and we will expand this class next week and separate it into two classes. So first, right-click here, add, and then select class, or you can just click Shift-Alt-C if you are using Windows. And then the first thing here is class, and here give it a name. We'll say bank account. Add, and it will take you to the class, and it's already written this thing for you. The only thing that it is missing is the public keyword. So you can create objects of this class. It has to be public. So first thing here is going to be the fields, right? And then you would have the methods. The fields are going to be a name, an address, a balance, anything else? No. So a name, address, and a balance. So let's create a name with it, which is private string name, small n because it's private, public, give it a big N, private integer, well, it's not going to be integer, double, balance, because we need decimals, and what was the other one? Private string address. Now we need to access those things from the outside, so let's create a method for each one of them to interact with. We want to assign the name, so we create public void, because of course we just assign the name, we don't need to return any answer. And here we will say, assign name, two empty parentheses, and those curly braces. Here you would add the code to assign that name. But now, because you want to assign a name from the outside of the class, you need the actual name, which is going to be sent as a parameter, and of course of the type string. Yes, I will leave it like this, so you can now see the this keyword. Now I want to assign this variable, which is coming from the outside of the class, to this field. Now, how do I make a difference between this and this, because they both have the same name? This is name, this is name. Well, of course, you can change this one to a different thing, but I made it as though so I can tell you about this keyword. When you write, let me write name, name equal something, for example. If I write name equal something, this name is going to refer to this one. Now you can see that there is a box around it, which means that this variable is now using this parameter. But if you want to access the field, then you will use the keyword this before it. Now if you double click on this one, you see that the box is right here. And we want to assign this name to that name, so here we will say name. This name is this name, and this name is that name. Now, because this is confusing, I will change this one to something else. You can just add underscore at the beginning or anything, or change it to a different thing. But when you change those names, now this keyword is not necessary and it will be great. But it's good practice to use it. Next thing is you might want to add a check here if the name is not already assigned. Then assign. If you don't want this name to be changed anymore in the future, you can say if name equal empty or name equal null, then do this. Well, if it is not already assigned, then do this. If it's assigned, it's just going to skip and do nothing. So this is why you would create a method to interact with this instead of making it public directly. If you make it public, you can just change the name from the outside, and that thing you don't have any restraint for it. Now we need something for the address. It's just something similar. Assign address. And here, of course, address, 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 address. You got the idea. The balance is something different. For the balance, we need two methods. First one is to withdraw, and the second one is to deposit. Now, if you want to withdraw, you should check if the balance is not below zero, if your bank doesn't allow it to go below zero. So you would say public withdraw, and here you would have the amount, the money of you that you wish to withdraw, which is going to be of the type double, and of course this is void. I forgot the keyword void. Double, let's say amount. Here you will have the checking, say if balance or this dot balance larger than amount, larger or equal than amount, then you are allowed to subtract that amount from the balance, which is just a balance minus amount. Balance minus equal. If the amount is larger than the current balance, it will do nothing. And this is for the withdraw. We need another one for deposit. I'm going to say public void deposit, and the amount that you want to deposit, of course. And here you will say if amount is larger than zero, then deposit. So you don't deposit a negative number and you end up withdrawing money. And here you say balance minus, or not minus, plus equal amount. Well, this is the blueprint or the class. We need only now to show the information about this class, and let's make public string. Now this is a typed method which will return a string, and this will be get information or info, get info, and it doesn't take any parameter because you just want to get the info of this account. This should return a string of all of those things. So I want to get the name, the address, and the balance. I will say return this dot name plus, because you can concatenate with a plus. I will say, well, I can add something prettier here before it. Say this is the name and this is the last name, whatever. I will skip that. I will say plus space plus this dot address, and plus the space plus this dot dot balance. Now this balance is going to be converted automatically to be as a string because you are concatenating this part with a string, so the result would be a string. But if you did this plus between the two amounts or numbers, they will be summed. But yeah, let's save it. Now this is the blueprint. This is finished. You can just close it. See, I closed it. Now this is just a file right here. I'm not going to interact with it. I will go to my form. I want to create the account first. So I have a list of accounts that I have created. Let me go to the code. I didn't do anything yet in the form. So at first I want to create a list of the account. And you remember how to create a list of type integer or string, right? I hope. And you are already familiar with the scope of a variable because we talked about that. So I will add it right here in the scope of a form. I will make list. Now, instead of doing a list of an integers, I will make a list of object of the type bank account. And I will give this as a name as, account is a good suggestion. Of course, equal new list of bank accounts. Now I have an empty list. The only thing is now to populate it with this button. So I double click here. I will say bank account, which is the type of the variable bank account, or let's give it another name. My new bank account. Long name, good name. Equal new bank account. So I have created the variable or the object and initiated that object. And now the only thing is to actually assign the name and the address and the balance. Now, we need to get the name and the address from the forms. We need to read this text, we need to read this text, and we need to read this text. So we are going to say, what was the name of the text? Text. Okay, textbox.name, textbox_name.text. This is something you entered in the text box, and this should be assigned to this object. So I will say here, my new bank account dot. Now, when I add dot, I get the list of suggestions about the public things in my class. I have the assign address, assign name, deposit, and some stuff from the system itself doesn't really matter right now. And then here we have the withdraw and we have get info. I will say assign name, open parentheses. When I open the parentheses, I get this suggestion in the balloon. It says string name, so I can know what I will pass one by one. If you have multiple arguments, you will get the list of arguments here, so you don't mismatch your arguments with the ones you are passing. So here, string and name. So this is already a string and it has the name, so I will just close. Of course, those spaces doesn't really matter. And I semicolon. And the same thing is for the address, my bank account assign address. And the balance. Now, because the balance requires a double and the text box only provide the text, I need to convert from a text to a double by using convert dot to double, and in two parentheses I'll give the value that I want to convert from, which is from the text box, text balance. Did I name it balance? Yes, text balance dot text and semicolon. You can, of course, separate this step in another step. You can say double balance equal and put this thing here, and then get this balance and provide it as an argument. You can do this. It's much cleaner. I sometimes just do it in one line because, yeah, I prefer not to have a massive amount of code, but just my preference. And now, because we have created the account in the button, after we finish clicking the button, it will be deleted from the memory. So we need to store it in the list. The way is assigning account, capital A, dot add, and here we will pass this name of that variable. And that's it. This is all you need to do to create an object of that account or that bank account and assign the new variables to it. Now, if I click this button, it will create a new object of that bank account. Each time I click it, it will create a new instance. You can add checking to check if the name is already existed or not, but I won't cover this right now. We are already far more beyond the limited time we had. The only thing I want to do is to show that account here in the list. So here at the end, let me just create another button. So this button is going to be show all accounts. And this should be empty first. So now when I click show all accounts, I didn't give it a name, but anyway, it should delete everything in the list and then add all the accounts from the list, from this list to the list box. It's pretty easy, saying list box dot items dot clear, which is removing everything. And here we need a for loop or for each, which is going to go through all the elements in this list one by one and then add them to that list box. I would say var. Var means, well, let me not go into var. This item is going to have, wait, did I explain the for each before? Why you are still muted? You can unmute yourself. Did I explain it before? No one want to say anything? Okay. I will just go on then. The type of item would be bank account, and that item would be getting through all the accounts from the account lists. And here I will say list box dot items dot add item dot get info, which is a method like this. So this item dot get info, this item is wait, what is going on the screen? Can you still see it?
Yep.
On my other account, it's cracking. Okay, let me just, yeah, and now it works. Okay. This item will refer to each account from that list of accounts. So it's just an alias. And then we are getting the getInfo method of that account. And of course, we are adding that info to the list box. That's we need to update this one. Okay, that's another step. We still have to do the withdraw and the deposit. So, the name, Mo, address, X, and the balance, 100. Create. We have created it. Let's show all the account. And we have Mo and the address and the balance. Now, if I press show account, I only have one. Let me create another one. Ronald, address, Y. The balance is, I don't know, is rich. And create account. Now, show all accounts. I have two. And of course, you can just create multiple accounts of the name of the same name because we didn't check for that. And you can have a lot of accounts now without any limit, except for your RAM, without copy and pasting code. Now let's do the withdraw. Withdraw is just very simple. Balance, well, I need to access whatever account you are selecting from the account list first. So I would say listbox one dot item selected item. Well, okay, now we are sending a string to the items. No, yeah, I usually send an object to the items, to the list box. So now we have to go through all of those accounts in the list to see which one is the account we are selecting first before we withdraw the money from it. And to do that, we need a for each. For each var item in accounts, I would say if item dot damn it. Okay. If okay, get info could work, is equal to the selected item, which is just a string. Text. Text dot to string. Okay. So that will convert the text to a string because it could have objects as items here in the list. It could have objects. It will show to the user a text, but it could be an object. So that's why you have to convert it to a string. Simply by doing this, I will say item dot withdraw and the balance from here, which is text box dot balance. Now, I used keyword return with the for each, which means I want to exit the for each whenever you find the first account, which is matching of the one I selected. You don't want your for loop or for each loop or while loop or whatever loop you are using to go on through all the lists, even though you already found what you are looking for. And we are withdrawing the money after converting it from a text to a double. Let's see. So, name, Mo, address, balance, create an account, show all accounts. I have now this. I wanted to withdraw, let's say 20. I select it. Let me create another one. Okay, so now Roland only have 20, and I have 100. I want to withdraw 20 from my account. I add 20, withdraw. Let me show all again. Now I have 80. I withdraw, show all. I have 60. I select the other account. I can withdraw, show. Now I have a 0. But if I withdraw again, it shouldn't go beyond 0 because we had that condition. This is good. I was planning on showing the balance right here, but yeah, showing it right here is also easier. The deposit is the same way as this one, except this one would be deposit. Create account, show account, I have 100. I deposit, show account, I have 200. Deposit, show account, I have 300. Well, that's all. Now I have been talking to about an hour and a half. I hope you are enjoying it and you're finding the information useful. That's it for today. Thank you so much for being here. I will stop recording and then I will get you